Hi guys, it's Gracie. I was actually going through my channel last night and I was reviewing some of my old content, and 4 years ago I had made a video about my mother passing away when I was 14, and with the current state of the world I know that there's a lot of heartbreak and loss going around right now, and so I felt it necessary to almost make a sequel to that video because I just felt like there's so much more to be said about my experience and how I dealt with the things that followed my mother's loss, even past that video. I think that a lot of the time when we deal with really hard things, we put on a mask and we act like everything is okay for the sake of ourselves or those around us, and frankly, that's not always the truth. I kind of experienced a delayed grief, and so I spent a lot of time reassuring myself that I was okay and everyone around me that I was okay, and making sure that, you know, I didn't appear like I was falling apart. And truthfully, I was. I was dealing with something that I had never expected to have to deal with. I was undergoing immense life changes. I think that I had never been exposed to so much change at one period of time, and I think that change is something that I don't do well with whatsoever. And I think that it's always really difficult to try and make things seem a certain way, and I think that on the internet it's even easier to make things seem a certain way. I mean, we live in the Facetune generation. It's really easy to gloss things over and make everything look like it's okay, but it's not always okay. And so in that video, I don't know if it was this video or another video I did, I spoke about a wonderful program that I attended, and it's called Camp Comfort Zone, and in this camp you meet other people who've also lost their parents, and you go away for the weekend and you do group therapy and things like that, and it's awesome. And you know, I think that was one of the big things that really helped me get through it, was that I had a group of people who were also going through the same thing I was. And I think that, you know, it's always really hard to find people who relate to you, but they're out there and they've gone through it too. So I think that's a very important part to have in your life. I also think that it's important to not hold yourself to a standard of being okay. I did that for so long that I think it really hurt me. And I think that I wasn't able to fully process what had happened because I was constantly trying to make it look like I was okay when I was, you know, really dealing with something quite difficult and really rough. And it hasn't gotten easier. I know that there's that whole notion that it'll go away and you'll feel better, but that's just not the truth. It hasn't gone away. I don't think about it as often. Some of the things that I dealt with after that video that I talked about in another video that's since been privated just because I went on and I just didn't like the video, was that I dealt with, you know, almost traumatic after effects. So for me, I had really bad nightmares. I had flashbacks. I remember being in school one time. This is going to be kind of graphic, so I'm just going to breeze over it. But I remember touching the underside of my desk, like I think it was in Latin class. And I touched the underside of my desk, you know, just messing around, like whatever, giving my hands something to do. And it felt cold. And then it was like, boom, I was back to like seeing my mom dead. And it's really hard to explain that to people who don't understand that, I think. And it's really hard for me to talk about this because it's just like the worst thing that literally ever happened to me. But that was an experience in which I really, I think, captured that there was something I was repressing, and I was dealing with some pretty intense side effects of being traumatized. There's a lot of trauma going around right now. I think there's a lot of trauma. I think there's a lot of grief. I think that the entire universe right now, at least our universe and our world, is encapsulated in pain. And I think that the most important thing that we can do is talk about it. I know that we're in this state where we, as people, just want to move on and we don't want to acknowledge things that have gone wrong or things that hurt us, but we really have to be able to grow and move on as people. So 5 years later, looking back, that was my biggest mistake. I thought that losing my mother made me weak. I thought that it made me vulnerable, temperamental, emotional. But I think looking in retrospect, it's made me a strong person. I think that it made me more of a survivor than a victim. And I think that if I had held on to the victim mentality, that it would have done me in. I think that it's so important to remember that you are still here and that you have survived this, and that, of course, it's going to hurt the rest of your life to not have your parent there, and it's going to hurt to not be able to share those same memories and big life moments that your friends do. But it's so rewarding to be able to grow and to change and to be, I don't think anyone would want somebody to continue to beat themselves up or to worry or to be sad. I wouldn't want that for my family. I'm sure you wouldn't either. And so I think that an important part of that is realizing that you have to live your best life. You have to move on. You have to be successful. You have to be strong, because that's what they would want for you. And they died, not you. And that's really hard to deal with sometimes, because there's this phrase that I love, and I go, by it religiously in my own life. And that's this phrase, and it's like, if you feel like you're gonna die, just die. And I know that sounds like a really funny phrase, and it seems like ridiculous, but I think it's true. It's almost like we have to amputate that part of us and regrow. It's like a starfish. We really have to make sure that we as people take those bad things that can really hurt us or make us bitter or resentful or, explosive, and find a way and deal with them like a very healthy, productive way. I know that often that's not the case. There's an increased risk of, depression, suicide, anxiety, trauma after you lose a loved one. And it's something we don't talk about enough. We do not talk about, as a society, death. I have been reading this wonderful book. I don't remember the title. I will link it in the description. But she is a death-positive mortician, and she travels the world and explores how multiple cultures handle death. And that book was so important to me. And her videos, it's Ask a Mortician here on YouTube. I'll link her channel below as well. But I think that learning more about death made me more comfortable with it. For some people, it's learning about it. I really like having as much information as I can. So I think that for me, learning every detail of what happens when somebody dies, before they die, after they die, like how they're taken care of when they die, I think stuff like that helps me. And it helps me move on to know, like, it's a very respectful tradition and this is the history behind it. But for some people, it's a spiritual thing, it's a emotional thing, it's very different for everybody. And I think that's so important to remember too, because you're going to deal with it differently than I'm going to deal with it, and I'm going to deal with it differently than you're going to deal with it. So it's always a different, combination of things for everybody. And yeah, I think that you really have to let go of things that you carry and that hurt you deeply, because if you don't, it just weighs you down. I'm not forgetting my mom. I'm not, abandoning her memory in my brain. I'm just learning how to move on as me without my mom, and I'm remembering the good times of me and my mom. And I think that that's kind of what happens when somebody dies, and if you've lost someone, you'll know this. It's very much like life before and life after. There is no returning the previous state. You have to remain in the future, in the present. And that's something that can be really hard. I didn't want to let go of a lot. I think that's why I projected this happiness and this bubbliness, because I just didn't want to let go of my mom. And by masking all of this, it was so easy for me to do that, because I just was suppressing everything I was feeling. And it made me able to just be this bubbly, happy person all the time. And that was not the truth. It wasn't the truth. I think that it hit me later on. I think that it, major life events really do it. So high school graduation was a huge one. I had always imagined my mom would be there with me. And then I think as it approached, I was like, oh God, like this is my first big thing without her. And so stuff like that really sets you off, and it really makes you realize how fortunate you were to have times with that, but it also ruins your expectations that you had, I think. So with mine being an early, adolescent loss, there are monumental life moments that I'm not going to get to share with her that was kind of expected. And I think that's the hard thing to deal with too, is just being able to deal with the unexpected and change. And like I said, I'm not very great at dealing with change. I like things to stay the way they are. And when it's not fluid and it's not the same, it makes things really hard for me. I think breaking yourself out of that pattern to be able to grow into somebody new is so important. And I think that you're able to grow into somebody new and better. I know that like we kind of paint ourselves as people who are deeply in pain or people who are entrenched in things that we don't want to feel. But it's so much easier to just take that and use it as your power. And so for me, using that as, you know, my strength was so important. And I think for many people it does help to do that. And I think like, you know, this was the first year for my mom's anniversary that we did a celebration. So we like had her favorite drinks, I had like her favorite cake. And like, I was just like, okay, so instead of today, me crying and being sad and like remembering the worst day of my life, it's so much easier to just celebrate how fortunate I was to get to have that experience. So I think that, you know, for me personally, finding little new things to do that honor her but also help me move on has been vital to dealing with that whole situation. And I never want to come on here and be sad or be mopey, but I just felt like I needed to talk about this because currently there's a lot of loss and heartbreak in the world. And it's been in my family, it's been in others' families. I've lost 2 family members in the last 3 months. So, you know, it's not been easy. It's never easy. It's never perfect. But we take what we have and we do what we can with it. And I'm really trying to use, you know, all the bad, sad things that have happened and use them as, you know, fuel. And I think that if we use these experiences that are supposed to bring us down and hurt us and make us weak, and we use them to make us strong, then we grow and learn so much as a human being. We learn how to love, we learn how to be great friends, we learn how to be empathetic. And I think that that was my biggest thing, is I grew up. And I was a whiny adolescent girl before I lost my mom. And then once I lost my mom, I was just like, oh, you know, welcome to the real world. Here it is. I know you didn't want it now, but this is it. So here's your, you know, slice of reality. Feast up and see you in a year kind of thing, you know? So yeah, and I also want to stress that I didn't think I stressed this enough in my last video. If you're having trouble, even if you're not, and you just need somebody to bounce your thoughts off of, go to therapy. It's wonderful. If not, there are wonderful online support communities. There's Facebook groups, there's Twitter pages, there's Tumblr blogs, there's anything you could ever need, you can find on the internet, I promise you. So there's lots of resources out there. If you want to DM me and talk to me, I'm always open to that. And yeah, so I just really hope that like this update kind of filled you in on that. I hope it helps. And I just want you all to know that I'm here and I am a human. And like everyone else, I feel pain, I feel sorrow. I have bad things happen in my life, but I think that if we can take those bad things and really use them to help us and move us along, then we can do better. And sometimes things are really hard, and they're too hard and too dark to help us move forward. But I think that if you really dig deep and you talk to somebody and you know, really allow yourself to be open about your experience, it really does help you move on. So thanks. I hope you all are doing well. I love you all, and I will see you all soon. Thanks for watching.